you so much for having me, and it's been an incredible honor to be here, and what an amazing event that you put on here. I've really enjoyed meeting everybody, and I see new faces. I've been fortunate enough to spend time with Stephen, and I look forward to your demonstration this afternoon. Okay, so what I wanted to do is, I have a wide range of things here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the different styles and different brushes just for a moment. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we did this week, why we did it, and I just wanted to touch on why I have some of these other paintings and why they're demonstrations, what I expect the students to learn during that time. So let's go ahead and get started. I think I'm going to start with my materials first, just to give you an idea how I get going here. I like to use a shallow well palette, and it's a plastic palette. I know the porcelain palettes remain white. This gets messy. I love that little messy palette. So I'm good with this. It's great for traveling. Shallow well, so for me, that means if I take my brush, dip it in the water, bring it into the well, I'm not adding more water, which is diluting my color. And I like to add new, fresh, creamy color whenever I start a significant painting, because that's going to keep the flow that I want on the surface. And one of the things that we've been having is, what I've been having, and what I'm sure you have found too, is trying to find the right paper surface that works for you. Like what I have used, like I started to do the 40 by 60s, and then reducing the size down to smaller paintings was actually a challenge for me. And what I started with when I started to get larger was I was using the Watercolor, which is, they're all wonderful papers, but I wasn't getting the effect that I wanted. I was getting more blooms and blossoms, and I couldn't understand why I wasn't getting the color intensity that I wanted. So I didn't really know about Arches paper. This is in the beginning. And so then going to Arches paper, understanding that it had a harder size surface, which meant that I was able to get the color intensity that I wanted. So it was critical for me to use the Arches. But now, we've all had some kind of problem sometimes with the irregularity in the surface, so that could be a challenge if I want to carry that flow of color into a large space. And so the demonstration that I plan on doing for you today is focusing on a large petal, basically large flower, so you can see how I like to flow my color. So again, I mentioned the palette and the brush, and it doesn't matter if I'm working on a 40 by 60, 30 by 40, or a half sheet, or even a quarter sheet painting. The brushes that I like to use are, depending on the subject matter, would be a blend brush or a natural brush, and rarely will I use a synthetic. I love synthetics also, but if I want to deliver the amount of water and color to the surface, to an area for a large petal or in the background here, what I need is a brush that has a nice water holding ability, and that's why I want a blend, not a synthetic. The synthetic is great for control. The natural brush is going to deliver too much water. It's great for the looser style of painting. And in fact, that's why I put these up here. Next week, we're going to do portraits, or not portraits, but figures. And I will not use the same brushes for this as I would for that. There, I want blend brushes and a natural brush to deliver water, to carry the color on the edges and soften edges. Here, I want more of a sloppy stroke, which I absolutely love. And it's Stephen, we were talking about the white of the paper. I thought, oh yeah, I have that, because I thought I always like to do something in the background. And, I just absolutely love this looser style. And this is obviously not the original, but it gives you an idea of the technique, and you're welcome to see that. I can either hold that up, or hopefully you can see that well enough in the screen. And for these paintings, what I like to use would be a Kolinsky, or maybe a silver, black velvet silver brush. I like that. Or these little Isabees, I would use that. And they're much smaller, as I know you all have quite a bit of experience. So to have that water holding ability is what I'm looking for. Okay. So if we look at this here, I did not bring some of my synthetic brushes, so it's not going to really work so well for me to try to do the demonstration and use a blend brush and try to force it to be like a synthetic, you know, just as too much on that. But basically, what you can see here, for me, in my opinion, for what I do, it doesn't mean everybody's going to feel the same way. But when it comes to a synthetic brush, I can have a nice load of color if I use the same size brush in a blend synthetic or a natural brush, right? Let's say we're using the same brush. The synthetic brush is going to run out of water and color quicker. It holds together tighter. And then the thing is, if you're trying to get a nice large wash and you're using a synthetic brush, you're going to end up with a lot of streaks. So depending on what you want to do. And then a blend brush will hold more water. You know, the color intensity to me didn't matter. It was the water holding ability that I was looking for. And it'll go further without running out of water and color. It grabs the tooth of the paper as it runs out. And then a natural brush, or a brush that has more natural hair and maybe fewer synthetic hairs, is actually going to go a lot farther. You can see it's much farther. So that is critical for what I do when I do the florals. And why I'm doing the floral painting is because that's really pretty much what I'm known for. So, okay. So I'm going to just kind of step my way through all of these. Now, I love this one. I may come back to that, but I think you're going to get more out of seeing the water holding ability when I get into this other painting. But I just wanted you to see that. I also wanted to do maybe a little demonstration here on just giving you an idea, which is a very simple exercise for you to do, even on a quarter sheet or a back of a painting, because it's just putting that water on here and then touching areas and flowing it, because it looks so easy. But if you don't move it, lift it, use the wrong brush, you're not going to get the results. Okay. And why I thought this was important too, this is basically, this was actually what we did this week. We did this one, we started this one up here. I left the other one that we did, which was in the second day, I left that back in the studio. But what I wanted to do with this one is just to show students, is it better for you to see it this way or this way? Okay, thanks. So with this here, I loved the composition of these flowers.
It's going off the TV screen. There.
Okay, all right, does this work? Okay, good. Okay, so what I really wanted to do, the original photograph is very dark, and my goal for this one was to show students that, you know, if you take a picture, the shadows can be really dark. You're not trying to represent exactly what you see. What you want to do is try to have where you can step away from your photograph, right? And so when I would take this to a workshop, people would get stuck in all the little shapes. Where does it belong? How do I go there? What do I do? Well, and if you have a limited workshop, you know, a few days, then you run out of time. So I thought, how can I get that same effect, teach them a little bit more, and where they don't get stuck in the shapes? So then I wanted to do more of a wet into wet background, and I absolutely love this. But the thing, it really depends, what do you want your viewer to see? Do you want your viewer to see the overall painting? Do you want them to see, you know, just a lot of shapes? What feels good to you as the artist? And what I really wanted to do, I do love this, but if I end up eliminating that and then focusing more on the flower and creating more of a darker background, then I have something that's much more dramatic and also maybe restful. It really depends on what happens to me, how do I feel? And then the viewer is going to have their own story in there. So this is really basically how far we got in the workshop. We really did a lot, but that was the last day, and it was just a half day on that. This is the one I plan on doing the demonstration on, basically, so you can see the amount of water and flow of color. And what I would do before, years ago, how I would really focus on things is having one shape, putting the water in, and then moving to the next shape. But then what is going to be the most efficient use of time, especially if I'm teaching a workshop? So what I ended up doing is thinking about how to harmonize shapes, how to harmonize the color, and actually thinking about that for this painting right here. Like, this is not necessarily one of my favorites, but we learned a lot in this one. And what we learned in this too, because when I would take it to a workshop, is that students would have a different color over here, different color over there, and they go, how do I fix it? And I go, well, let's try this. And so what I learned, and that's a fabulous thing about teaching, all of us that teach, we learn so much from everybody else too. So by putting water over it and just maybe dropping color in here, using the technique that I would use for this, will flow and then it'll lay on top of it. So we're basically glazing. We don't have to have a solid wash on there. It's just, you know, adding color here and there and tying it and harmonizing it. So that's why I wanted you to see this one. And for this one here, what my goal was, I'm just trying to give you a clear shot of it. The goal of this one here, and this is a demo, but it's like how to go ahead and, it's an orange flower, they could be tricky. What are we doing?
You're going off the screen again.
Okay, thanks. So the orange screen, the orange flower, that's okay, the orange screen. But you know, how do we end up, like orange is really not one of my favorite colors, but I force myself sometimes to do things that are, you know, just to see what I can do with that. And then that's actually, I have a tendency, like I'll have a thought and I'll jump over to that other thought. So now I have that thought and I'm going to try not to go there right now. So anyway, just working with the shadows and how to keep it harmonious. And also if I was in my studio, I would do a lot of negative painting for the center instead of, is that okay here or not? Okay. Okay, so I would do a lot of negative painting, which I would do in that other flower, which I'll show you in a second. But for the students, what is easier is if I do masking. Now, I don't necessarily like to do masking for a lot of things, depending on the subject matter. But what I do find interesting, and I actually do like, is if you mask and then glaze over it, then you soften some of those edges. So there's everything, you know, and then finding something that really works for you, you know. So there, I have a huge appreciation for that. But what I learned, well, you know, I'm a self-taught artist, so what I pushed myself to do was actually work with stamens in the center. Okay, so this is a half sheet, and the original paintings on this, before I did this size, were 40 by 60, 60 by 40. I would do diptychs and triptychs of that, and what that did was teach me how to simplify, because I really couldn't see what I was doing, and I had a giant piece of foam core, and I put it here, and it also took me away from being more tight with smaller brushes. I had to force myself, and what I ended up learning from that was the use of water. And so then I bring it down into this. And how I would end up having to look at those paintings is that I would have to put them up and walk out of my studio and look back. And so, like if you have your regular painting, a lot of times with the flowers, if you use this brush that's too small, what ends up happening is you're not getting enough color on that. So imagine with a 40 by 60, you have to force yourself. And that's, again, why I still use the same brushes, but it taught me to, you know, load my brush more, you know. So I just wanted you to have an idea on some of those things. And why I would do something like this. Again, it's not about the flower. Like if people think that, oh, I paint flowers, it's not about the flower. It's not about being cute or pretty or delightful. You know, that is the form. That's the shape and the vehicle to express. And what was interesting in the class, like we were talking about what is the story, right? What, like every painting, especially like a landscape or a still life, or maybe a still life, or a lot of paintings have a story that you're trying to convey. With this, it really actually made me think about it. What I'm trying to do is convey more of an emotion, because it's whatever I feel. I'm a very intuitive painter, and whatever color is here is going to trigger some emotion in somebody else. Because like I did not like reds and yellows. Let's see, I think I've got it up here. I wasn't very, like when I started painting those large 40 by 60s, I did a lot of red and yellows. And they would kind of nauseate me in a way. And I had to think, well, what is it? And then, so that was fascinating to me, and it forced me to kind of work through it. And it was interesting to see what would happen when I would take that composition to a workshop, because a lot of students would end up with a headache and they wouldn't feel good. And so I don't take that to a workshop anymore as far as teaching, but I'd be like a mad scientist back there. Isn't that fascinating? Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to this. So what I'm thinking about here is whether or not I just wanted to show you one petal first, and then I have all these different steps sketched out. I think I'm going to start with this. You can see just one petal. What's interesting about this is that what's important is a lot of times people will put the water and color in here and then they'll lose their highlight. And then if you see my painting upstairs, like that actually is kind of a funny composition too, because it's the bud on one side and it has more purples on the other side. My intention with that particular painting was I wanted to take something that was kind of split down the middle, and how do I kind of bridge it? Oh, silly me. Okay, so anyway, okay, this is my magic trick that I love to do, and we just go ahead and take a piece of, this is 140, you can do it with 300 also. I'm going to do this on this one here. Just take it. And I'm sure a lot of you already know how to do this. Just start a little tear like that. I'm going to pinch it like this, change the amount of pressure I apply, and tear. Voila, love it. Okay, so now what I want to do is show you the amount of water, because even if you haven't or aren't taking my workshop, this is a really good exercise for you. And what I need to do is think about the brush that I want to use, which I'll be using. I'm going to have smaller shapes here, and then I'm going to apply it into this shape, then I'm going to get larger, then I'm going to apply it into the flower. So, let's see. Glasses are a good idea. And it's right in front of me, of course. I'm going to take a little bit of my permanent rose, put that there. And what I'm looking for is more of a creamy color. That's why I'm doing this. I'm going to take a little permanent alizarin crimson, and I have quinacridone magenta. And I like to use the Winsor & Newton quinacridone magenta because it has a nicer look to it. It's not as cold as the Daniel Smith one. So when I tell my students to get the quinacridone magenta, that's why I'm telling them. Okay. And then we talk about pencil lines and all sorts of things, but let's talk about the amount of water. Okay, before I put water here, I'm going to actually take my 20, make a puddle. I'll grab a little bit of this is not going to be anything fancy right now, but I want you to see the amount of water that I'm using. Okay, I'm just going to get a puddle here, and I'm going to make another puddle of a Hansi Yellow Medium. I'll put that right over here. Just like that. So what I'm looking at is how much water is in both of these. You know, they're not really soupy, and I'm not very good at, as we talked about this week about the milk and tea and chai. I don't really think in those terms. So what I'm thinking about right now is I want to have a rectangle here and a rectangle here. Do I want to use my hake brush, or do I want to use a large brush like this? It's going to depend on the size that I'm working on. I'm just going to make a little puddle here. I'll use this brush. This is the number 30 Silk Star brush, and it is designed for silk painting. But I'm going to go ahead now, take a 14, because I don't want to use a 20 there. Otherwise, I'm going to apply too much color. And I'm just going to go ahead and put some in here, right there. When it comes to the actual design, what I have to do is make sure I don't bring my water all the way up, or what will happen is it's going to go over and I'll have irregular lines. So if I leave it flat like that, nothing's going to happen. It's not going to work well. I'm going to use the water that's on the surface and move it around. So this is a very It's a fun thing to do. And you actually learn quite a bit because you'll figure out whether or not you want to leave your paper flat, you'll end up with blooms, or if you end up moving it like this, I like that highlight, I might retain that highlight. So it looks so simple, and it is simple, but what happens is people will overwork it. And so I would do another one here, but then I would gradually increase my size. You don't need to see another one, you get the idea of what I'm doing. So I'm gonna go ahead, increase the size here with the hockey brush. And what I'm looking for is something that holds more water so I can have more of a puddle on the surface. Instead of, I like synthetic brushes, but I don't want an even layer of water. I know I could force myself to lay down more of a puddle, but that means I have to work a little harder. So I'm gonna go ahead, get this down here. And since it's a larger size here, I'll go ahead and I'm going to use the number 20. And I'm just paying attention to how much water, how much color, how it feels. And if I had a pencil line, I would have stayed away from it. Like I mentioned, I don't want to go over it. Let's just get some color in here, just so you can see how this idea is applied to this. Here, I'm going to go onto the dry paper too, so you can see I would go ahead then and soften. This would be basically the initial layer of what I would be trying to do. Like we did this in the second day, because I want them to work with the water. And if we leave it like this, it's not going to look good. In fact, I have some dry areas here, so I'm just going to bring in a little more water. Okay, and then I'm going to use the water that's on the surface and move it around. This is how I would handle the 40 by 60s, all those larger paintings, and smaller ones. So if we leave it like that, again, that's not going to look very good. Then I'm just going to change the angle of the paper. So you get the idea. And if I go back and forth so much, you can see that it ends up disappearing, right? So it's just something that we work with. Or let's say this is evening out. If I want to have a bit more controlled color like this here, depending on the size that I want of the stroke, I'm deciding, do I want to use a 14 or a 20? Just gonna throw this in here so you can see. This gives you an easy way to practice this idea if you want to. Okay, if I leave that alone, that's competing with this. This area is drying, that's feathering. So how am I going to handle it? I'm going to go ahead and lift it and tilt it and move it around. So that's the basic. So let's go ahead and move that into a flower. I'm going to go ahead and skip this because I think you have a pretty good idea. And we're going to go right into this. Now I like to work on 300-pound paper. So, because there's a couple things, a couple reasons why. If I was using the 140, I'm not going to get the strength of the outcome. It looks beautiful, beautiful. I mean, you can end up, other paintings. I wouldn't say my painting, because if you're able to be drier with it. Well, you can also, I don't staple my paper down. I just can't get what I want with the 140. I get that beefy look in there. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, and the decision I would make is, do I want to treat this as one petal or two petals? What would I want to do? And I'll treat it as one petal right now. I originally thought I was going to do it as two. I'll change my mind. I'll give myself that freedom, because I always tell my students, we'll work with whatever's happening on the surface. Let's be flexible. Okay, I'm bringing my water almost up to the pencil line, wherever I want it to curl over. I'm laying down a puddle. I'm not going to pay attention to those stamens. I'm going to go right over them. This is the shadow area. I'm going to paint right over those pencil lines. Then since it's a large area, I'm going to use a number 20. And I'm going to I think I'm going to go ahead and add my reds first. I'll take the same color combination, a little bit of the permanent rose, and maybe even a little bit of the quinacridone magenta. It's just because I like it. And even thinking like this is taking too long. So I need to get a bit more water in there. Then I'm going to go right up to the edge, right up here. You can see how it's exploding. Let's bring some color in. And I'm trying to have a light touch. Through here. Let's see, how far do I want to bring it down? Big strokes. So when we're doing something like this, I tell my students to stand up. And then when they do the detail, they can sit down. They get a lot of exercise. Okay, I'm going to bring the yellow on this side. I do like the color mingling on the surface of the paper, but I also like to mix it in the palette. And what I see is that a lot of people, they take too much time and are too careful. And it's not really, I'm checking in with myself there, and I thought, it's not that they're being too careful. It's just a different process. Okay, so I'd like a little more color over here. I don't want to lose my highlights. So I'm going to change the angle of the paper. Well, that might turn into 2 petals after all. So I'm going to take that water, let it run over, and then down. And if I have too much water, I'm going to take my hockey brush, remove the extra water, and just touch a few areas. And remove this extra water here. Remove the extra water. And then what happens is I will work with whatever is happening on the surface. Now, I don't want to go back in and overdo it there. And what I'm deciding right now is, do I want to go ahead and use this on this side? And I will, I think I will. So in the past it would work 1 petal at a time. We have a lot of water, let's take advantage of it. And I think I'm gonna go ahead and take the number 14. I'm looking for any areas that dip down. I'm gonna try to just add a few strokes right through here. Now we don't want it to stay like that. So I'm going to use the water that's on the surface, and I also don't want those brush strokes to be the same size. So I was going to say manipulating it, and I thought, well, do I want to say massaging it back? So now here we have this petal. If I come in with my water, we have a dirty edge over here. I can add water over here since I have the color combination in my palette. I'm going to bring this down, I think, a little further. And I don't want this area to bloom, so I'm still staying away from that petal. Just like this. And maybe I'll touch a few of these edges. I want you to notice I take my brush, dip it in the water, remove the extra water, go along the edge. So I'm not going to get that bloom. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and take the permanent alizarin crimson. I just grabbed it anyway, so quinacridone magenta and permanent rose. And again, I'm taking too much time thinking about it. So now this brush is too small. I want you to see those little strokes? I'm going to end up with more white areas in there. I'm going to switch to the 20. And I don't think I like that little bit of permanent alizarin crimson in there the way I thought I would. Now I'm going to come right up here. I'm going to wait and have a little dry space. I'm trying to get away from my yellow here. Bring that right up there. Let's bring that down. And I also need to pay attention to how wet the surface is, because That can easily stay that way if I don't move, which we don't want it to. Then I'll bring this down here. And I would tell my students to also pay attention to the amount of pressure that you have on the brush. I'm going to grab a little more yellow. Try to tie these two together because these are my most critical petals. And these strokes, because having those strokes will give me those highlights. We'll just bring it down a little bit more. Now that's dry, then I'll come in with my 30, remove the extra water, soften this edge, or if any of those strokes aren't doing what I want it to, I might come in and soften. So that would be the first step. And just move it around. And whatever develops, I'll work with. Now I think that's pretty. And I thought, oh, I like those highlights. Okay, so that is the first step. Where did I put the second step? Oh, I guess it's right there. So what I would end up doing is then coming down into this area, and this is the simplest form of this flower. And then I would be thinking about, do I need more color? Depending on what I want. If I want drama or more color intensity, I can come in wet on dry. Or if I add more water, that can be fine, but it's going to take me longer to build up the color that I want. And, so I have a lot of decisions to make. And I'm looking at this, I like the color that's here, so I'm going to just leave that alone. And what I'm going to try to do is work with the shadow instead and contrast so then I can see the highlights in my petals. So I'm going to get this a little bit out of the way so I don't step on it. There we go. And I'm thinking, do I want it to be light and pretty and delicate, or do I want it to be dramatic? And I'm going to go dramatic. Now I'm also thinking, do I want to leave the colors that I have in here with that yellow? I might leave a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and sometimes I like to use the Winsor Violet Dioxazine, but I've been using a lot less for a long time. So maybe I'll take a little Winsor blue red shade. Let's see. And just bring it into my mixture here. So I'm trying to find a combination that I like. I want to make enough color so I can get that shadow in. I'll use a little bit more of the Winsor Blue Red shade. I'm not looking really for purple, but I'm thinking how it's going to lay on top of the color there. This is not enough color, and I'm just being a little careful, and I don't need to be careful. Ultimately, I can start off being careful and thinking about it, but then I'm just going to mix it together. Okay. So I'm just not finding exactly what I want, but this is it right here. This is what we're going to work with. Okay. Then I'm thinking about the amount of color that I have. This is still not going to be enough, and I could work with that for a while and continue to add to that. But I'm just going to get started here. Okay, so I'm going to go wet on dry right through here, because this is going to hold that color intensity that I want, using the number 20. I'm going to try to keep a fluid stroke. I'm going to tilt my paper at an angle because then I can use that angle or that bead of water. And I'll continue to bring that down. And I can keep it that dark if I want, or I can go ahead and add a bit more water and shift the value. I don't want it necessarily to be a straight line, so I'll go ahead and move my wrist a little bit. Let's Let's see if I like that. I think that's all right. Then I'll move down into this big shadow. So this will be a big shadow. I'm not going to pay attention to the stamens here. I want this to roll over, but I'll go ahead and work with this because what we do is we do the wet into wet. Basically, we establish all that soft edges there, or not even edges, but the wet into wet, and then we start breaking things down into smaller shapes. Let's go ahead and continue with this. Now I feel like I'm running out of my color. This has more water in there, which is okay. But what happens is I don't want to completely shift the color as I go. That's not going to be a good thing. So I just have to keep adding to that puddle. Don't think too much. This is a big space. So coming up into this area, usually what I would do is add water down here, and that way I can get away with a large area. But I'm looking for the color intensity. Okay. Now I won't be able to necessarily handle that stroke with this brush all the way down, so I'm going to go ahead and maybe use a 30, and this is how I would take care of that. I'm trying to save it, or save myself through this, so I don't end up having brush strokes everywhere. Bring water down here, maybe incorporate a little water there. And then basically like I did in the petal, I'll be doing the same thing down here, only in a smaller area. Go ahead and get that in. I'm trying to get a crisp line so I create more contrast with the petal that's in front. Thinking about the amount of water in here because it can move. If I wiggle my brush and I don't have enough water, then it's a problem. Okay, let's move that. And as we do that, we need to pay attention to that. Otherwise, that's going right across the paper. So maybe what I'll do is just connect those two areas together and let that color run down. And then to kind of take a breather for myself, I'm going to go ahead and carry some water up into this area. I'm using the water here. Let's add a little more water through there. So let's look at that. And I'm going to try to direct that over here. Now I could go ahead and try to lift up some of that water if I wanted to. If I was in my studio, I'd probably take a little more time to do that. But I'm going to go ahead and continue with this. And I'm trying to decide how far do I want to carry that out. Since that's a large area, I'm going to use my 30, but I'm going to make a bigger puddle. I don't want to shift the color too much. Trying to stay with the same ones. I'm going to use the 20 right here just to get into this area. That was not that one. Let's use this one. And this time I'm taking the brush, dipping it in the water, removing a little bit of the water. If I don't do that and put that in here, then it's going to be one big mess, and I'm not going to try to get rid of my water on that towel. I'm just going to keep trying to carry it out. I usually don't paint with this brush. I usually just apply water. But since this is a large area, I'm going to use it. And I'm going to have a slightly lighter value as I come up here. Okay. So I'm looking for a place where I can kind of rest. Actually, I was thinking about that. If I'm going to carry this water up higher, have that be a little bit more of a puddle right up there. And then I'm going to try to carry that water all the way around. So I'm working with a little bead of water right there. Then I'm trying to decide, do I want to use this and come up here or here and come down here? If I do this down here, then I can end up with a bloom. So I'll turn the paper. Get a bit more water because I don't want this to stick. And I'll bring it right up to this edge. My hope, or what, it's not even a hope, it'll happen. It's this little highlight here will end up popping out. Okay, let's look at that. Flip that around. I'm going to stand up again so I can have a more fluid stroke. Make sure you don't have anything on your arm. And as I'm doing this, I'm thinking I might like to have just a slightly darker value. So this is the other reason why I don't attach it to a board, because I'm going to be looking at what's happening with the bead of water. Maybe I'll go a little bit darker through here. And I have to stop really soon because otherwise I'm going to end up with blooms. So we don't want to overwork it. I can say that and I'm thinking, no, you're overworking it. Okay, so let's see. You have a lot of flexibility with that. So I always tell my students not to be afraid to move that water and paper to lift and tilt. And then we would go ahead and work with the background and other details. And hopefully that shows you how we would handle a large space. Okay, so then it would be something like that. Let's put that over there. And then I'll just come in and add some stamens because this is all little fussy stuff right through here. And you can see once we get that in, these little petals here, right there, and then go darker with the background, then it makes everything pop. So let's go. Which one?
The one you just brought out.
This one?
Thank you.
Okay, so that would be basically it. And then we're going to get those stamens in there, or anthers, if we need to be exact. Okay, so I'll try to find out, or find where they are, and I'm not going to think about it too much. I'm going to have a big stroke. Big stroke. Maybe connect it down here, a little negative painting next to that. And change the amount of pressure on the brush. And then I have another one somewhere up here. And then just kind of connect that. So then I would need to reevaluate, do I need to go darker anywhere else? And I wouldn't go darker with any shadows here. I don't mind if any blooms happen. If there's a few of them, it doesn't bother me. But if I didn't want it, then I would go ahead, wet that, and take a magic eraser, wet that, and then just rock it on there. So that would be the basic of that first demonstration. Are there any questions?
You might have said, are you working on cold press? Or
Oh, cold press. I did. Yeah, thank you.
Do you ever work on hot
press or do?
If I do the figures, I like hot press. Yeah. So I was going to continue on with another demonstration, but where are we on time?
You've got, another.
40 minutes or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that was, it's like, okay, now what? Okay. All right. We got that.
When you start to put like a separate thing on the wet and wet, when you go back, do you use a thicker paint so you don't get any?
Like let's see, so when I do a wet into wet, I should have brought the other one over, but I didn't think we needed it. So like, we have the wet into wet, and then when so we're going from the lighter values into the darker ones, so yeah, I would add a little more color into it, and then working wet on dry, so I get those clean lines. Is that, let's see what we have in here, if I have an example.
So you never did those back ones?
Not working with the 300 pound on the arches. Are you using 140?
No, 300.
Really, with the 300? Lift and tilt your paper a bit more. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the process before? How do you come with this composition? Do you sketch? Do you have something sketched before go to the paper?
Okay.
So how do you?
Well, so what happened was years ago when I was switching from landscapes, because I was using small brushes, doing pretty intricate kind of landscapes, what I wanted to do is kind of just express, right? And the flowers were the vehicle for that. And to find the compositions, I didn't really, where do you find them, right? So I would go to nurseries, and then everything was so precise and perfect there. And that's how I started, because I didn't know how to take a picture or what to think of, and everything was kind of at a distance, and those were the old cameras where you get the little 4x6 pictures. But what that helped me was that I would take whatever pictures I took, I would flip through them like cards, and whatever popped out is what would be something that would draw my attention, and I made a pile over here and a pile over there, and then from that, what would happen is I recognized that if I'm looking at the overall subject matter, then I'm thinking, okay, it's more about telling the viewer what it is. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to allow them to come into my painting, and for them to come in, then I need to change the crop or composition there. So that was the main way that I do things. And also, if you crop things down too much, then they can also be uncomfortable. But I like that. I think that's interesting when you crop things down and it becomes thought-provoking. So do you want it to be comfortable and nice and non-threatening, or, actually with this one over here. Okay, so the original painting, this is just a flower that I have. A lot of the flowers come from my garden, and this is an angel's trumpet. And what ended up happening was it's a bigger composition. And so from that one flower, I was able to get 6 different compositions just by moving it around. And what I'm looking for is movement more than anything. So it's a different kind of story, a journey. I think a journey is a better way of saying it. Yeah. So let's go ahead and hopefully that stays there. Let's see. So this is a little bit different. I mean, it's similar but different in many ways. I have the colors on here, and then how to separate it, how to build that color up, like you were asking that, right? How do we build the color up on top of this? Okay, there we go. So let's take a look at this. I'll move this over. So here, you can see that I have a lot of water on here. And how do I build up that color intensity? I can't hear you. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to take a little bit of my quinacridone magenta, a little permanent rose. And fact, I'll put a little bit more of the quinacridone magenta into my palette. I'm going to think about where are the petals, what petals do I want to pull out. For this one I did mask. I wanted little water drops on there, so I masked the highlight. And the color might be a little bit different, but this is how I end up looking at something. It's like, all right, here's my pencil line. I want that to go back. I want this to come forward. That has a highlight there. I have a line here. Do I want this to be one giant petal, or do I want to separate that? Let's see what in the world I did. So you can have a better idea. So I'm going to go ahead and take my color combination. Well, it's not really, it's a color combination, but it's just within the same family of color. Here, I want this to pull forward. So I'm going to go wet on dry, get the glasses on first. Wet on dry. And, but I'm trying to decide, do I want to go, leave this alone, go here, or do I want this to come forward? I think I'll have this pull forward. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead, go right along here. Wet on dry, trying to make sure that it doesn't lift any of the previous color. Try to have a light touch. And then take, I think I'll use my Silk Star brush here. And then I need to dissolve this edge. Either this one or the 30. Lift the paper so the color can move.
What kind of brush is that?
It's a Silk Star. I did this when I used this brush when I started painting years ago, and then I couldn't find it. I needed another one. And so then I started to use the Cosmetop Mix B. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull that around. And then each layer, the color just isn't going to move in the same way. So I'm trying to force it to move a little bit more. I'll focus on these two petals here. Everything pulls together within the last 10 minutes. What?
I said it's hard to know when that 10 minutes is, when to stop.
True. Okay. So then I'll go ahead and lift this. And in this side, I don't want to have too many brush lines, so maybe what I'll do is switch over to my Hake brush. And I'm paying attention to, with the brush here, if I brush back like this, am I going to apply too much water that's going to flush into this area, or am I pulling it out? We have to be careful that we don't overbrush it. But you can see now that petal is starting to separate. We have that. This pulls forward a little bit more. I need to get a shadow in here. I could develop that a bit more. I don't like the look of that one up here. I think that was in the original layer, so that's a little tough to change. And then this looks a little weak. I'm going to go ahead and get more color right in here. And I'll pull that out. I don't want that line to be so straight, so then I'll go ahead and just move it, bring this down here with the 30. Again, lifting and tilting the paper so it moves. And I'm trying to decide, do I want some other little lines in there? Do I need them? And and I'll show you what I'm talking about. But that would be with my 14, come in and maybe put a few more lines in here. I need to make sure that I have more of a tapered edge, otherwise if I stop, I'll have a blob. And then I'll lift and tilt so they transition and soften. And then I can leave it light down here and then try to get a shadow in this area. So I'm getting a little bloom over here. And I'm thinking, how nice. Let's try to fix that. I could go ahead and get that in here, but when this, I just want you to see how I would handle something like that. And so if it's in I could wait for it, or the other thing I may do is come back in. I'll get a little more color. And this is so counterintuitive because it would be a real problem, because this is drying, this is still wet, that's going to move over there, it could easily continue to bloom, but I'm willing to give it a try. And so I'm going to come back in. That was way too thick. And I was actually going to go in a different direction. But let's just see what happens. And I don't use a spray bottle very often, but I'm thinking, what if I used one? Okay, so let's go ahead and try that. So this is how I build my color up. And then I'd need to evaluate it, and then I would continue to go around to all the other petals. This might be a little too much there. And if there's a bloom happening and I really don't want that bloom, I might use a hairdryer to stop it. So let's see how dry this is. This is still a little damp, but I'm going to go ahead and try to work with that.
Birgit?
Yeah.
Want that wet rag on top of that paper right there?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, really. Well, this is still damp. Actually, I was just thinking of your style, Peter. I thought, well, maybe that would add some interesting texture. Like, I'd like this to come out a little bit further, but I'm going to go ahead and try to get the shadow in right through here. I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm doing it. You go right through here. And let's see, how do I want to shape that? I'm going to bring it over into this area. And I'm going to have this go a little darker. It could go a little more dark than that. But okay, so I like what's happening here. For this, I want this to go tucked into the flower a bit more, so I'm going to go right through here. I'm deciding, do I want this to be in front of that or not? Let's see. I'll go ahead and leave that in front, so I'll leave that alone. Go a little darker right here. And then I'll soften this edge. Color in there. Why I left this here was because both of those were really wet. All right, so I like in general what's happening, and then I'd like to go darker here. If I go darker here, that's going to pop out. I will go darker there too. And I thought, do I want to continue with this so you can see all that? Let's pull this forward, and by pulling that forward, I'm going to go a little darker right through here. Create some contrast. A little more contrast right here. And then I'll use here I'm using the 20 to soften because it's a smaller area and I don't want to release too much water. And then in this area, I would have to wait for that to dry before I go in here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a small space right in there so I can continue. I could add more color here because if we look at that and that and that, this is going to look flat. So what I need to do is add just a little more color through here. Because what happens in my style of painting, one thing what's important to me is depth and the values, trying to, like, I want to pull the viewer in. So I'm thinking, do I want to do that right now? I wanted to, but what I think, I'll just go ahead, see these lines here, and just add some water. I don't want to have too much water. Remove the extra water because I just don't want it to be the same as that. I want this to be lighter. I'll just use the same basic color combination that I've been using up here. Maybe not as dark, maybe a little bit more of the magenta or the permanent rose. Follow the previous layer as my guide. Create some lines. Make sure that they're not actually equal in size. That has just a little bit whiter there. Take the 30, remove the extra water and soften that edge. I could lift it, but I also have water right here. And I'll soften this feathering edge there. I have to think, do I like that? I know that's crawling. This is still damp. I can't really do anything about that right now. I could add little spots in here if I wanted to. Like henna lilies, I think a lot of them have those spots. I just, the flower, I like the shape of the flower. And then coming over here, let's get that to go a little darker. I'm using the Windsor Blue Red shade and bringing it into my color combination. I was trying to decide, do I want to use a different color? Do I want to use an indanthrone? Do I want to use an indigo? And indigo is going to be a little darker, which is going to change the whole feeling of the painting. So that has more of the Windsor Blue Red shade. That's a little too purple. But I want that to be in the shadow. That up. I want to leave a little light in there so it's not completely flat. I'm going to try to go along the dry edge, so I'm going to leave a gap. At home, I would make sure that that was completely dry. And then I'll soften this edge because I'd like to retain that highlight down below. I don't want to press too hard. I want the water to release off the brush. Okay, let's see what I can do. Now, I think that might compete with that. I think it's interesting, but it might be too much, so I'm going to add a bit more water into it. Just barely touch the paper. And allow that to move. Maybe I'll force it up a little bit more. But what's good about what you're seeing right now is how I would handle it. I would continue to move it like this. And then I'll go to this side. And if I wanted, I could come back in with a bit more of that and glaze on top of it if I feel it's necessary. This may not be as clean as what I would depending on your focus, you know, in the studio, anybody in a workshop is gonna have better work in their studio. Well, in the workshop, I think, because we're just doing it, you know, we're learning and we're just doing it. You have a different focus, you can turn your music on or whatever you wanna do. Or step out and do the laundry and come back. I'm trying to release water from this. That's not releasing the amount of water that I want right now, so I'm going to go ahead and take this. Okay, and then I'll remove the extra water here. And remove the extra water here. And then when it comes to those funny little things up here, spikes, what I like to do is use, again, the same idea. It's going to be up here. This is still a little damp. I'm going to try to put some in. And basically, I like to take the reds and the greens. I'll use, you could mix your greens, or you could use, to make it easy, I could use a permanent sap green. This is dirty water right now. Just going to get water right in the center. And then, if I use this much water that's in the palette, that's going to spread. I'll add a little bit more pigment to it. And I'm deciding what side do I want to go on. On this side, bring it up. I can also show you how I do white flowers in the steam and so much. Wait, plenty of time. If you're up for it. Take a little bit of the yellow, bring that in there, maybe a little bit of the blue, bring that in there. And then let's go on this side.
What yellow is it?
That was a Hansi yellow medium. And I didn't get the color that I wanted from, I was gonna grab the permanent sap green, and I tried to grab a little bit of the blue, but it got a little muddy, but it's fine. Okay, let's go ahead, maybe. It would be easier if I saw it right side up. Okay, so seeing it this way, I don't like how red that is on that side. It's equal, so I'm going to go ahead and try to mingle that a little bit. So I treat this the same way as I would the flower. And lift a little color out. Because those highlights are what's really going to make a difference. I'll do another one over here. Are there any questions? I've got you in the palm of my hand.
When did figures join your wonderful abstractions from florals?
I think it was last year, or maybe a couple of years ago. Sue would know that more than likely. What do you think?
The question is, when did you create the figures class?
Well, I think, I know it was New Year's Eve. I can't, a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago,
2 or 3 before.
something like that. Yeah.
The class has been in place for 2 years.
Okay, then it would be probably 4 years or so.
Is there a home interest that inspired you?
Well, you know, what happened with that is that I was teaching for the Louisiana Watercolor Society years ago. That was my first traveling workshop. And I did not want to travel. I didn't, you know, I'm kind of like, I'm happy at home and doing things. But they had me down there, and it was just an absolutely incredible experience. And what inspired that was doing the portraits was, for one, just the people down there and the characters that are there. And I saw a nun walking on Bourbon Street at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I thought that was so interesting, and to see the structure and in fact, we'll be doing that in the workshop. So she was my first one. And again, then that turns into a different kind of story. It's not like I'm trying to evoke an emotion, it's more of a wonder. What is the story there?
And you have keys in her hand too.
She does, but I never really put the keys in there. I never really thought about that so much as until, recently. Yeah. Because there's so much, and maybe you don't see it at that time, but you see it later. Okay, let's just see. Go ahead. What I'm really, I lost a highlight, but I don't think it's absolutely critical. I'm going to add a little bit more of the yellow. I don't think anything is critical. What we do is we work with whatever's happening. That's why I like watercolor, because it's very reflective of everything that we do. So, the shapes might be a little big, but I can compensate with smaller shapes back there. We put another flower back there, but you can see how, I think you can see how we're starting to push and pull a little bit. I hope you can see that. Can you see that? Yeah?
Do you ever go back and try to restore a highlight somewhere, or is that a big no-no?
I don't, it just isn't going to be the same, because then you've touched the paper in a way. So that's why I start with it light and the wet into wet there, because I like that seamless look. And so I babysit it for quite a while, and I like the way that looks. You can't, of course you can do it, but it just doesn't have the same feeling.
Gotcha.
So let's take a look at what else I have here.
Can you do one water drop?
Oh,
Interesting.
sure. What's it, Glenn? Oh, the water drop on this here, sure. I'm going to show you basically with the water, like voila. Okay, with the water drop, so you can do it a couple of different ways. If you want to pre-plan it on your painting, you can, but then you're kind of you're kind of committed to it, If you decide you want to put your highlight in, let's say that's some masking fluid, this would be masking fluid here, right? So the way I used to like to do it, because I thought it was very impactful, was to have the highlight right there and then glaze over it or wash over it, do your painting, and then you have to come back and then you lift a little color out, and then I put more water here, and then I allow the water in that area to move out to the edge of the shape of the water drop. It doesn't matter what shape you have. And then one area is going to be darker, one area is lighter, and then when you get that shadow in there and you get that highlight off, it's like magic. Absolutely magic. So let's see, do I have anything here that I can, these are so small that it really doesn't show off well. So, and then if we have something that's light, well, I can show you how I would do it on a light surface. The dark surface is very dramatic, and I am trying to think, because these are small, I don't think you're going to see much. I'm trying to think, do I have anything hidden in there? No, I mean, if I'm fussing with it like that, you really can't see much, right? So basically, this is how I would do it. But what would be important is for me to have it dry. Okay, let's get some water in here. The thought is, I'm going to make it big, is I would get water in here, because I want you to be able to see it. Hopefully you can. Can you see it okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, and then I would lift. I would take time, maybe make more of a horseshoe. This is just a standard little circle, so you can't really see much. Here it's very easy to do on the dark surface. So to compensate for that, I'm going to go ahead and think about the surrounding color. Then I'll drop a little color in here and allow it to find the edge of the water. something similar to that, but what's really gonna make the magic is the highlight. And I did not put the masking on there, but I'll show you maybe, let's see, I don't think I have the right eraser for that, but it doesn't matter, I'll tell you. And then what I like to do is have more contrast, so I'll go right around here. And I like to go higher. Unfortunately, it's wet, so I'm gonna stay away from it. At least I think I am. And have one edge tapered. Fill that in. I'm thinking, well, what if we touch that? Maybe have a little bit more light coming through the drop into the shadow. And it's going to work once we get that highlight. So that's the important part. Like, and I swore that we had to use the masking, but you can always lift it out like that, or put a little water there and then use a towel and lift it out. And if you have a little eraser, you know, you can retrieve your highlight through that. Okay. So one thing I'd like to show you, let's go ahead and clean that up. Does that help, this idea? Okay. They're a lot of fun to do.
About 10 minutes.
Okay, great. Perfect. So, let's see, which one do I want to do here? There they are. Well, you'll tell me which one you want to see. How about if we do that? You want to see either the multiple stamens or the basic idea of doing a white flower. Okay, I can do this. I can do this. Okay, let's do the basic white flower. Because I think everybody overworks it. Does that seem to be the problem? Where you put too much color in? Okay, so I have steps. Let's see. I can actually just probably show you it this way. So first, actually, I think that's probably a better idea, is just showing you this way. Okay, so what I would do is use clean water. I would use a blue-gray combination, and then I would put the strokes in the same way that I did for the red flower. I'm happy to show you, but I'll just tell you first. Oops. And then I'm going to stroke, like, you understand, right, from what I did with the other one, or do you need to see it? You can let me know. Okay, and then I put a little tint of color here. So that's the first layer. Then it needs to dry. And if you don't try to go faster and put too much color in too fast, because you think, oh, I just need a little color there. If you put too much color or think you have it done on the first layer, it's going to look flat. So just do it first, light value, and then you come back in and reapply it and lay it, and you're going to use your previous layer as a guide. So can you see the difference here? This is just that and that. I don't know which one's which on my hand right now, but you can tell. So it's very subtle, and that's all you need. And then you start putting in your shadows. You don't want to go too dark with your shadows. And then again, like I did with the red flower, you're going to try to separate your petals. And then, unfortunately, it would be nice to have shown you a dark background too, but you get the idea of the flow of color. And then this one could use more work still. It's just kind of like middle stage, but you get the idea. That's how we're going to develop that. All right. I think that might even show up on here too. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to kind of just walk through these. we have our sketch, I would do the same thing as I did on the tulip, like you can see here. I'll maybe hold that up. I'm just shaping the flower, not shaping, but just finding the direction of where I want it to go. Using the two colors, I like the French ultramarine blue burnt sienna. Not everybody's gonna like that. It has a granular look. If you don't like that, you can hit it with a hairdryer. It'll flatten the color, you know, or you can use a different blue. You could also incorporate a pink into that or some other color that feels good to you. Let's see what we have here. And then what I would do for this particular lesson is to find the center, because this was the big deal of this lesson. Now I'm going to do a little negative painting. I don't know which way is the best to show you, and I might not actually be able to really show you, but it gives you the idea. So instead of using the masking, I am finding the shapes in here, and then I'm going to break it down. It's hard to do it backwards. And go into a darker value, right? So I'm going smaller with my shapes, darker value, and then I'm going into using a smaller brush, getting smaller. Okay, and then let's say if we look at this idea, what can happen is this can look like it's sticking out, so to push it back, then I would put a wash maybe over that area, push it back. Don't be afraid to go over it and push areas back, because then you're working with your values. And it's a lot of fun to do something like that. So I think that would be pretty much it on that. Are there any questions on anything? Okay, Sue?
Want to see that demo of the water drop? You can go to the YouTube channel, search Birgit O'Connor with the water drop.
There you go. Oh, if you want to see the, thank you, Sue. If you want to see the water drop demo, if you go to my YouTube channel and then go water drop. Yeah.
How can you do a dark background and keep transparency?
Again, like for this area here? Okay, so that really was the big deal of this particular lesson. So it's like we started up here and then worked down here. And as we apply the color, we start to transition down there and then add a bit more water and shift the color, and that's like 3 glazes through there. Yeah.
What are the lovely colors in that beautiful gray and the one that's on the table?
Here?
Yeah.
That has the French ultramarine blue burnt sienna blend, and then it also has a little bit of the quinacridone magenta, a tiny bit of that, and the Hansa yellow. Yeah, I'm thinking, do I have a quinacridone gold now?
When you get into those real dark darks, do you limit how many layers you do?
I usually like about 3, you know, but then again, we have, I don't know if I have it right here, like the one that we did, I'm trying to think in the class, I think this could use a bit more. Okay, so let's look at this. So this is what we did first, and then we went in and put the background in. And then, is this 2, do you think? 2 layers?
Yes.
Yeah? And then to get that intensity, because what was interesting too is, it just seems so subtle down here. And like maybe I like the reds in that one. It depends on how I feel that day. Maybe I'll want to have more bold in here. So, yeah. Okay, any other questions? Okay, well then thank you. Oops, 5 minutes, 5 minutes.